so many unknowns around this virus.
Not only will America dig itself out of this hole they put us in, we're going to build back, and we're going to build back better.
Washington Post Live's First Look. This is your one-stop shop for news and analysis, all about the Democratic convention. Each morning, join me for a live update from a top Washington Post reporter, followed by commentary and analysis from Washington Post columnists and contributors. This morning, we were supposed to have Annie Linskey from the news side with us. She's on the ground in Wilmington, Delaware. She's not been able to make it. We'll get her on at some point later in the week. This morning, we're going to go right to commentary and analysis to two of my colleagues on the Washington Post opinion side, Ruth Marcus, deputy editorial page editor, and editorial board member and columnist Charles Lane. Well, good morning, Ruth and Chuck. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, we have a lot to talk about and a lot of time, so this is going to be fun. Ruth, I'll start with you. Last night to me it was just chock-a-block of incredible things that happened in those 2 hours. For you, what is the one moment that stood out?
I think the moment that stood out to me the most, but I'm going to cheat and take two. The moment that stood out to me the most in terms of the impact potentially on the campaign and the election was the remarkable fact that Barack Obama, the former president, let loose on his successor, let loose in a way that we have rarely, if ever, seen a president do before. I'm writing a column about this right now, and the historical analogy, and I'm glad to say I'm not old enough to remember this, the best historical analogy is Herbert Hoover, who was defeated in 1932 by FDR and then went at FDR in 1936 at the convention. But we haven't seen anything like that since. I think, and this is my cheating part, the most emotionally powerful moment for me, and I think for a lot of people who were watching, was seeing Gabby Giffords, the congresswoman from Arizona who had been so tragically and seriously injured by a gunman, doing a remarkable job of summoning her capacity to speak on behalf of Joe Biden, and that really moved me.
You know, the one thing about that, about her video, I learned something new. I didn't know she played the French horn, and I thought that video, I think I sent out a tweet saying, "I'm not crying, okay, I'm crying." It was so moving and emotional, the whole thing from the video to what she actually had to say. Chuck, for you, what was a highlight or the highlight or two?
Well, I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to just take one.
Thanks, Chuck.
But it's the same one, which is the Obama speech. Not only because of what Ruth said, which is how unusual it is for a former president to go after the current president, but the tone of it and the very grim, unusually for Barack Obama, very grim statement that he was putting forward, that our democracy is really on the line here, and this almost apocalyptic sense of what the stakes are in November, I thought was pretty dramatic. Barack Obama is somebody who is a very good orator, but you're used to him drawing off the energy of a crowd that's present usually it's an arena or big room. And here he was just kind of all by himself in space there, kind of just speaking to the camera and in a way speaking directly to you. And one wonders the effect that has on the audience. I mean, to me, it felt very somber, and he didn't smile a lot. He didn't talk about Joe Biden a lot. He seemed almost to be saying, look, folks, this is really about a lot more than just whether or not Joe Biden gets elected. He had a kind of I would guess, dutiful series of comments about the positive side of Joe Biden, but it was mostly a warning about the negative side of another 4 years of Trump. And I thought that was quite stark.
I'm
You know,
gonna, can I slightly disagree
sure.
with my friend
Oh,
Chuck? Uh, I do think it was more than dutiful about Biden. The middle third of the speech was really about my brother Joe and about the positive attributes of Biden. But I think, but I think the part that people will remember and the part that was sort of shocking in its intensity, as Chuck says, was the apocalyptic view of the stakes. And it wasn't, the setting was really interesting. President Obama traveled to Philadelphia, where he had given the convention speech 4 years before, but he wanted to be in Philadelphia because he wanted to be in this setting of the birthplace of the democracy that he says is on the line. And he was in the Museum of the American Revolution before a display of the US Constitution. And that was the message he really wanted to drive home, that this very carefully crafted document with its checks and balances is to some extent in the balance in November.
you know, part of the reason his discussion of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris seemed to be, I think his words were overshadowed about them because of the intensity and heat behind the warning he was giving. You know, I was watching, and you know, we've covered President Obama for his entirety of his 2 terms. Some of us have spent time with him, you know, personally. And what I remember thinking watching him is that one, he was really, really angry, like personally, deeply angry. I started noticing that his cheek was twitching, which is a sign, but also, and I don't know if you noticed this, I thought at points, particularly when he was talking about our ancestors, our American ancestors, those who came before us, who endured things that were much worse, but who found a way to make the words in those documents come alive. And that to me is when I thought he actually might cry. I had not seen him that emotional since Charleston, since the eulogy for Reverend Pinckney in Charleston, one of the Mother Emanuel 9 who were murdered by Dylan Roof in 2015. Am I reading too much into it? What did you see that?
He was go ahead, Chuck.
No, I agree with you, and I think that I think he's one of many Democrats actually who feels the same way, and that there's a kind of a communion going on among Democrats right through this convention. Difficult as it is, because of course it's all happening kind of in this weird virtual space, you know, to establish that communion. I think the risk, though, here's the risk, is that the convention so far, as I see it, has been very, very, as political conventions were bound to be, and especially in a situation like we're in now, very, very anti-Trump and very, very warning of the consequences of another 4 years of Trump. And the positivity around Joe Biden has, to use your word, Jonathan, I think kind of gotten a tiny bit overshadowed. We can't ignore the fact that that Barack Obama, as it's been reported, was a little reluctant about the Biden candidacy, and that Biden and Obama, you know, apparently have some history going back to 2016. And that's why I think tonight is really going to be the moment that makes or breaks this convention, when Biden really gets to speak for himself and you know, really, you know, put forward the case. But I think that the risk of this tone is that it's not positive enough. There's not enough positivity.
Ruth, Ruth, do you buy that? I mean, maybe I'm watching a different convention. I'm seeing both things at the same time. The warnings, the apocalyptic warnings, but also here's the light at the end of the tunnel. And his name is Joe Biden, and her name is Kamala Harris, who I swear we're going to talk about after this. But what do you make of what Chuck is saying?
Well, I think I'm going to place myself between the two of you. I do think that there is a challenge for Democrats and for Vice President Biden to put some meat on the bones of Build Back Better. Okay, it's actually, I think, a good slogan. It is forward-looking. It's positive. It really encapsulates the challenge before the country. But I'm not sure, and Hillary Clinton actually, I thought, did one of the best jobs last night in explaining what a Joe Biden presidency, the presidency that she didn't get to have, would look like, and to tick through some of the action items on his agenda. But I agree with Chuck in the sense that I'm not sure many people on the street could tell you what Joe Biden, President Biden, would do besides not be Donald Trump. I think that Hillary Clinton started to talk about that last night. Senator Warren started to talk about that last night. Kamala Harris, just to segue to that point that you want to get to, I thought she did a smart job last night of introducing herself, presenting herself to the country, giving some of her humanizing background before she became prosecutorial Kamala Harris, which we've seen and which can be very effective. But I do think that the missing piece in the convention right now, which I do think is going quite well for the Democrats, to the extent that people are watching it, and to the extent, as President Obama suggested last night, that anybody is really undecided here. The missing piece is transmitting and educating the country about that positive Biden agenda. And honestly,
right. Yep.
just to be blunt, reassuring the country that he's up to it.
Right. Can we talk about Kamala Harris, Senator Harris of California, the vice presidential nominee? Ruth just gave her thumbnail of what she thought of Senator Harris's speech last night. Chuck, what's your view?
I thought it was okay, and I thought, she's a dynamic presence. There's no question about it. She is a fluid, smart speaker. All that we expected. And I don't think, she's the vice presidential running mate. I don't think her job is to put forward the positive agenda, right? That's the traditional role of the vice presidential candidate, is to go after the other side, and she did that effectively. I think it was a kind of a powerful moment. I don't know how closely you guys were watching, but when she finished speaking, they had this sort of giant board of, I don't know what they are, I guess Skype images or whatever. Every
Zoom,
single
man.
one
It's called Zoom. How many Zoom calls have you been on? You don't recognize the gallery view.
Skype now, but I don't know what was on that board, and I don't want to give a free plug to any software company that wasn't necessarily involved. But that big board of faces were all women. I don't know how closely you watched that, and I'm sure
and one was duplicated. One was duplicated. I saw her twice.
Well, maybe they were twins. Maybe it was twins, but the impact of that was very powerful. That here is a woman of color, who is going to be on the ticket. Obviously, the fact that a woman has been on the ticket is not brand new, but a woman of color certainly is. And again, I don't know how you guys feel about this, and I hate to do this as a theater review too much. But watching this convention, I feel the same way I do about watching like a couple of Major League Baseball games I've seen. It's the same thing, but it's happening in an empty room, and it's very hard to gauge the energy that it's generating. In the public. I mean, it's got a good production value, and she spoke really well, and she kind of hit all her notes, and yet I just don't have any sense of how it's working, in the public.
How it's playing, right?
Yeah, because you don't have that immediate feedback.
Ruth?
It's really hard for the performer, for Harris in that instance, to speak in that empty space. And I thought in some ways, when we had those moments where the camera was pulled back and you realized she was speaking in the empty space, that really did underscore the difficulty of it. I kind of, because the response in a crowded convention center is both authentic and manufactured. It's authentic in the sense that the delegates are there and they're cheering. That doesn't tell you anything about how people at home are interpreting it. I kind of like the intimate moments where you see people in their
Yes.
homes, or in the places they've chosen to be, and when they are speaking directly to the camera. I thought I loved Michelle Obama's speech, but I didn't like, as long as we're in theater review, I might as well do this, those moments
We've
where
got
you
time.
realize there were two cameras there and they shot her from the side, because I think the power of this moment, which has been thrust upon both conventions, that we can't have real conventions, is the capacity to speak directly to the audience. And I
Yeah.
think that's a good thing.
If I may, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of how they used to do the State of the Union responses, where they would
Right.
put whoever it was just like in front of a camera, and it seemed to put that person at a real disadvantage to the president, who had the House of Representatives full of people. Of course, they've corrected that, where they've now put a little audience in front of the person who does the response too. But it has an infomercial-y feel to me. And again, it doesn't matter what the rest of us pundits think. It matters what the viewers at home are feeling as they watch it, and that's just very hard for us to know.
Well, I mean, since we're in theater review mode, I'll give my theater review. I was wondering how this was going to work. We'd never seen anything like this before. How was it going to work with no audience, no cheering, no spectacle? And instead, what I think we've gotten, Ruth has used the word, we've gotten an intimate experience, which I think is better. One of my complaints about going to these conventions is that so much is going on. I feel like I'm there, but I've seen nothing. I would learn more from my mother, who would text me asking me about this, that, and the other, and I have no idea. And I'm here, but you're reading about it. Here, I think the politicians are by necessity speaking shorter. They're using the economy of words much more effectively. And that roll call of states, that needs to be permanent, to actually be able to see the country and to see the people in the states where they live, I thought was very powerful. So I want to segue from the DNC for a moment, because last night I kept thinking, especially after the Gabby Giffords moment, what are the Republicans going to do next week? I have no idea. I have not seen any reporting. I've been a little busy, so I haven't looked for it. But do either of you have a sense of what we're going to see from the Republican National Convention next week?
Sure. The analog to Gabby Giffords, and by the way, on Gabby Giffords, a panel of the Ninth Circuit in California, with a Trump judge voting and writing the majority opinion, just struck down California's ban on high-capacity magazines, which I think I wrote about at the time of the Giffords shooting, which would be a very effective way to reduce carnage. So one little criticism there. But the analog to Gabby Giffords at the Republican convention is going to be the folks who, I'm forgetting what state they were from.
The St. Louis couple. The St. Louis
Yeah,
couple.
St. Louis couple, Missouri, who came out with their guns. We're going to have a picture of, to use a phrase that is going to sound familiar, American carnage and disorder and chaos in the streets that Democratic mayors, I'm channeling the Republican argument here, that Democratic mayors are unwilling or incapable of going after. And it's going to be more fear-mongering about Antifa, fear-mongering about immigrants. And that is going to be the scare message. It's hard to, it's kind of easy to understand the Democrats' ability to prosecute the case against Trump. We have a pandemic, we have a terrible economy as a result of the pandemic. Trump is going to talk about, I presume, the China virus in some way, and to talk about the economy that would have been if this horrible thing hadn't been inflicted on him, and if he hadn't, done all the testing that makes the numbers bigger. Everybody
Chuck,
knows out there. I'm joking, I'm sure.
Right. Did I cut you off, Ruth? Were you?
No, you didn't.
Okay, Chuck. To Ruth's point, if the RNC is going to be all about fear and loathing, racism and xenophobia with a hint of misogyny, how is that a winning message for the president's reelection?
Well, I mean, I don't know what winning message he could have, frankly. I mean, back up a step and just look at the situation in the country. I mean, it's not good. And it's not what you would normally expect to result in the reelection of the incumbent. So he's got to find some way to cast the other side as even. I mean, his approval ratings are barely in the low to mid 40s. So he's got to find some way to cast the other side as like even worse, even more threatening. And the way he's found is, and I'm sure they have focus groups and polls that are telling them this, is the looting and violence and murder in the big cities. And I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but they've come out with a very shrewd piece of campaign advertising out of Baltimore, where they have Black woman Republican who walks the streets of Baltimore. She's running for the Elijah Cummings seat. She's not going to win, but they put together very gripping commercial where she walks through these streets of Baltimore and says, look at this terrible city that the Democrats have been running. It's gotten like 6 million views on Twitter. And I looked at the commentary and they're all from white Republicans, right? So that's kind of the game they are going to play. And plus China, plus the threat of China.
I just want to let folks know that the spots you see on my face and on my blazer, it's the sun streaking through the blinds in my apartment. Just so you know, I'm fine. Everything is okay. I'm still sort of hard pressed here to see how. Great, that video of Baltimore has, would you say, 6 million views on Twitter, and most of the comments are from white Republicans. So that's playing to the president's base. My question is, what is the message, the outreach message from the president so that the president actually wins people over, brings people in, or does he not care?
He doesn't care. I mean, Jonathan, for the last 4 years, all he's been doing is appealing to his own base. I mean, he's maximizing the base. I mean, I guess, sorry to interrupt, Ruth, but just to finish on the point, I guess if I have a concern in a way about what the Democrats are doing, it is, I think they should come up with an answer on those points. So far, I think, especially on China, I think they've just been kind of ignoring it. And putting the virus to one side, the whole issue of trade, the whole issue of China's aggressive policies in Asia and everything is something where I think that's something Biden ought to talk about more, because I think it's a real issue.
Ruth, jump in.
Just to offer some of the positive message that the Republicans and President Trump are going to tout next week. One of the people who's going to be speaking, I understand, is one of the women who sentenced Trump, sentenced Trump commuted, or that he pardoned.
Right.
And so there is a sort of effort at outreach. The reality is, as President Obama suggested last night, there's not a lot of people left to reach out to. The number of undecided voters is vanishingly small. And so it's really a question of motivating turnout. And so that is why you hear some of the alarming rhetoric from both sides, but certainly from President Trump in terms of ginning up his base.
All right, we've got maybe less than 5 minutes left, but let's talk about something non-convention related, and that is that Senate intelligence report that was released a couple of days ago. Ruth, and then Chuck, you jump in. Talk about the significance of what was released.
Well, it is really the final chapter of a series of investigations of this amazing episode from 4 years ago, which President Trump calls the Russia hoax, but is really anything but the Russia hoax. The most, I I think, salient point, and I was thinking about this last night, of the report, is that it makes very clear that President Trump's own campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, was in league with a man named Konstantin Kalimnik, who we knew he was working with before. He was one of his clients, but he was also clearly, the report says straight out, a Russian intelligence agent. And so when, as President Obama was speaking last night and President Trump tweeted that he spied on my campaign, I thought, wow, that is just about the essence of chutzpah, to complain about the FBI doing its job at the time, which was to look at these very alarming developments that were happening with Russia trying to win/steal the election, the last election for Donald Trump.
Chuck, you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I'm going to disagree slightly with Ruth, not in the sense that the report is insignificant or anything. I think it's, I think it mostly is stuff we knew. I think including the Kalimnik connection to Manafort, we knew. I don't
knew
think
the
it's been shown that
didn't know the explicit nature of his role. Sorry to interrupt.
But I don't think there's any evidence that was aware that Kalimnik was a Russian agent.
Fair enough.
Okay,
with business efforts of Manafort in Ukraine. But having said that, I think the big picture here is that Russia was trying to influence American public opinion in an election year, which is pretty bad, pretty audacious, and probably still going on in some way. I mean, and China is doing it too.
Some might say that Russia was rather successful in trying to influence the 2016 presidential election. We are out of time, but I have to. I've got to get you to give me your one sentence projection or analysis of what you want to hear. excuse me, from Joe Biden tonight as he accepts the Democratic nomination for president. Ruth.
You can trust that I'm up to the job.
Chuck.
I was going to say one word: energy.
All right.
Chuck wins.
Well, I don't know about that. I think Ruth. I think you win. I like your phrasing. Chuck Lane, Ruth Marcus, thank you very much for coming on First Look this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for joining me this morning on Washington Post Live's First Look at the Democratic National Convention. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. with Washington Post chief political correspondent Dan Baltz and fact checker extraordinaire Glenn Kessler. We'll also speak with Washington Post contributing columnists Donna Edwards, the former congresswoman from Maryland, and Hugh Hewitt. Once again, I'm Jonathan Capehart, opinion writer for the Washington Post. Thanks very much for watching First Look.